We will win, ba. We're back here. Bomole Motamai, Husni Ariamo, Charlie Ariamo. What's going on? What's going on? What's happening to our audience on YouTube? Hey. Okay. Today, what are we talking about, Charlie? As you can see from the no outfit change, we're doing a couple of episodes in one day. We've been thinking about this for a while, so we're just taking advantage of this time right now, people.
It changed.
Well, technically, it is the next day for us in Cambodia. It's now.
It's actually midnight.
1 minute.
Oh, it's actually okay. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, anyways, to bring it back to what we're doing. So today, we're going to be talking about performative activism and allyship, with regards to the whole Black Lives Matter movement that's happening right now, and just calling out some brands and some specific actors who have said some nonsense, basically.
Yeah.
Celebrities, I should say, rather than actors, because they're not all actors.
Yeah. Actually, let me just speak for me. My position is that these people whose track record has shown that they are hostile towards Black people and have been actively racist, of course, take advantage of these kinds of situations and put out a statement to show solidarity to people because that's what's popular and that's what's fashionable at the time. But obviously, their track record shows that they are they're implicated in all sorts of nonsense, as well as not really having faith in them in their future endeavors, as they claim to speak up for Black people. And basically, it's just very disingenuous, and I feel like it's really they're vultures for taking advantage of the situation as well.
Absolutely. They're just following the trend right now, and I think that's what we've noticed, not just from celebrities, but also from some of our white friends that we have on our social media. You notice that all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're speaking up on topics that you've never spoken up about before. All the racism is not something that's new and has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years.
At least our lifetimes.
Well, exactly. And not once has some people ever said anything, and then all of a sudden you're looking on your timeline and you're seeing these white girls and these white boys posting stuff, hashtag Black Lives Matter, hashtag All Lives Matter. Because they're sitting there thinking like they know what's going on, and they don't, because they're just literally following a trend and not actually doing some research and reading up on things. And it's adding to the problem rather than actually resolving it. And it's just stupid. We need to stop.
Yeah, sorry, before Husney comes in, I think one of the annoying things is that it just takes up some real estate of somebody who's actually either going through it or saying something to combat that situation. For these people actually jumping on the bandwagon, and that's one of the reasons why it's important that people listen. And as people have consistently been saying, as people of color, Black people, the ones at the forefront of this movement have been saying, if you are truly an ally, you should be going out there and educating yourself. We do not have to physically give you the resources all the time. Like, read a book. I have got a case of books behind me. To be honest, I'll be happy to write a list of 10 books below this vlog and wherever we release the podcast, for people to start reading up on the issues that they face, and also give them a piece of advice to not watch the news when it comes to this kind of thing, because media bias. Go on.
Absolutely, and it's something that we can share on our socials as well. Basically a list of resources, but again, it's not Black people's jobs to educate you. At the end of the day, white people are the ones who created racism, so you should go out and learn about it, learn your history, learn how your white privilege adds to it, even if you're not necessarily doing anything, and you feel like you're not doing anything. And I'm not racist. you still need to go and do the work and educate yourself. And there's a lot of resources. Do your Googles. It's not the job of Black people to do that for you. We need white people to go out and learn and teach themselves. At the end of the day, people who
Get closer. Get closer.
The people who are going to dismantle racism, well, is the white people, because you guys created it. So
Yeah, and on that point, like, it is not enough to not be racist. You have to actively be anti-racist. It is no longer enough to just say, I am not racist. As you have seen, the Nazis and the Nazi sympathizers, all the right-wingers, are perfectly prepared to be out on the street. So, like, if you're an able-bodied person and you actually believe what you're tweeting about, like, you actually need to be out there in opposition to the people who are saying that the treatment of Black people is okay so far. Like, it's really the time for people to step up, basically. Hosni, you've still not said anything, my brother.
So my thing is, I'm going to use the weirdest analogy ever, right? So imagine it's like you have, so let's say in this case, this kid's getting beaten up regularly. The kid, represents Black people, been getting shot on all his life in school, and then all his other peers are white, they're watching and everything like that, and they keep telling them, like, guys, this is happening to me, this has happened, da, da, da. They can see it happening, they don't do anything, and then eventually this kid gets beaten up severely where he actually dies. And then them same people who didn't do anything, who were just there watching, like, trying to like pretend nothing was happening, are the same people now coming out to the funeral and that. Like, that's how it kind of feels like. Why are you at the funeral if you had a chance to do something from day one? You're basically a coward, and you're basically complicit as well. Like, that's how crime works, basically, if I'm correct. So if your mate's got a gun and you're the lookout and you're basically looking out to you give him a signal, you're the same as the person who's pulling the trigger on the other side. That's how the law says, and that's how it is. And I think morally and ethically, yeah, you are the complicit person. So I think it's very like disingenuous people coming out just doing it for the likes, doing it for the W online to look good. This is not about looking good. This is about actual it's a humanity situation currently in America. They talk about humanity records around the world, how Saudi's got a bad humanity record, blah 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 blah. But there are places like America where police are basically trained to fear dark individuals, people of color, particularly in the communities. And yeah, they're getting a really, really bad rap. So I think it's very annoying when I just see all this stuff online, people putting avocados and toast and stuff on there and saying Black Lives Matters underneath, like all this nonsense. Like, if you're not genuine and you're not sort of genuinely trying to think about it and declutter your brain and restart it and reteach yourself and be anti-racist, there's no point you coming out now acting like you're gonna support, because there's no point. No one can count on you, and they're the type of people that are very, very flaky. Everyone's had these friends before in high school. You tell them, be here, we're going here. They big you up. They're like, yeah, I'll be there. Before you know it, don't show up. Flaky friends are never real friends.
I feel like you're better off just saying nothing. Just don't say anything.
Yeah.
I'd rather you just show your true colors and just not say anything than sit there and be like, oh, Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Here's a question for the audience. Would you have a flaky friend that basically might come out with you one time, but when it really, really matters and you want to rely on them, they go missing every time continuously, let you down so much? And then that's what these people online are, and including brands, which we're going to get onto too.
Yeah. Yeah, so that leads us nicely into the next bit, which is celebrities and brands just coming out with these statements when we know that they perpetuate racism, they perpetuate capitalism, which we know capitalism is also something that highly perpetuates racism as well, and it's a racist structure. So people like Jeff Bezos. So I've seen loads of people liking his Instagram, basically because on Amazon they've put a statement, or not statement really, just says Black Lives Matter and blacked out the top part, like a banner, put a banner on the Amazon website. And a Karen was annoyed and emailed Jeff Bezos personally, saying basically, I'll read the email out so you guys can see if you haven't actually seen it. So the email is titled All Lives Matter.
Of course.
And she says, it is quite disturbing to get on the Amazon website and see Black Lives Matter. You provide services to more than millions of people, including myself and the rest of my family, for our business needs and personal purchases. I am for everyone voicing their opinions and standing up for what you believe in. But for your company to blast this on your website is very offensive to me, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from others. All lives matter. And if it wasn't for all these lives providing their service to your and your company, where would Amazon be today? That was her email to Jeff Bezos. She actually sent it to his personal email as well, it looks like. He then responds back, but it looks like he hasn't actually, the picture that he's put up on his Instagram doesn't look like an email. It looks like he just wrote it on his notes. Because let's face it, Jeff Bezos is not going to spend his time replying to personal emails from Karens that he doesn't know. Anyways, so his response was, no, Macy, that's Karen's name, I have to disagree with you. Black Lives Matter doesn't mean other lives don't matter. Black Lives Matter speaks to racism and the disproportionate risk that Black people face in our law enforcement and justice system. I have a 20-year-old son, and I simply don't worry that he might be choked to death while being detained one day. It's not something I worry about. Black parents can't say the same. None of this is intended to dismiss or minimize the very real worries you or anyone else might have in their own life. But I want you to know I support this movement that we see happening all around us, and my stance won't change. My sincere very best to you, Jeff.
So I have okay. Karen and all the Karens. I want to remind everybody, just so that at least it's documented on this podcast, Black Lives Matter was a leaderless movement that was formed in the midst of a racist killing of Trayvon Martin by Eric Zimmerman, who then got off from the murder trial by somehow charging the deceased Trayvon and saying that he was defending himself, even though he's on the police's own audio. He called the police, literally told them that he was hunting down a black boy with a hoodie on, shot him, and then proceeded to get away with that. So proceeded to get away from the charges with saying he defended himself. So that's the context in which Black Lives Matter was actually formed. The people who started protesting obviously started with this chant, and then that's how the movement initially formed. I even, you know what, there are so many black killings that, to be honest, I forget which year this happened, but obviously that was Trayvon Martin, and that's a case that's Googleable. Like, if you want to challenge it, Google it. All Lives Matter came as a response to that, because black people were on the streets protesting. It's not just the police violence, it's the violence of a system that allows people who murder black people to get away with it. Again, in the midst of COVID, we've seen Ahmaud Arbery, who is another kind of representation of this very phenomenon, where civilians can arm themselves, hunt black people down, and get away with it from the law. And that's another part of the system of police brutality that we are talking about. The point that we are actually supposed to be focusing on right now is Jeff Bezos. So, Charlie, can you go ahead and roast him for a second, please?
Sure. So we all know that Jeff Bezos is the world's richest man. He is the first trillionaire, or is about to be the first trillionaire.
Yeah, he's forecasted to be the first trillionaire, and he's currently Forbes #1.
Exactly. And you don't get to that position without killing a few people, basically. He is the perfect example of capitalism, and how if you use capitalism in a way to kind of benefit you, you can get to that type of position. But in order to do that, you have to cut people along the way, and that's just how it goes. And usually the people who get the most disenfranchised because of capitalism is Black and brown people. They're the people who work on the front line. They're the people who are doing the actual hard work of this company to make this man a trillionaire. And he's sitting there saying Black Lives Matter and giving out this fake response. Anyone who sat there and liked it and praised him for it, I'm sorry, but you're stupid, because he is a perfect example of a racist, because he is doing exactly, he is using the system to benefit himself. As a white man, he is literally using his white privilege to get to the top. And no person of color would ever, and this goes for any person of color, would ever get to the position that he is, because it just doesn't happen for people of color. And it certainly doesn't happen for Black people. And he's literally killing loads of people. You have his response to coronavirus, how he didn't let his workers have proper breaks and actual proper social distancing when they're working in the warehouses, allowing them to kind of be subjected to coronavirus and getting the disease. And that is just one small example of how he doesn't look after the people that work at the bottom. And he literally has enough money to help all the Black people in the US and probably the world, and end poverty and end everything. But he chooses not to do that. So he's a dickhead, in my opinion. And yeah, so I think what he's done is, obviously Black Lives Matter at the moment is a bit of a trend. And so it should be, in a way, because obviously people need to be made aware of it, and it's about time people take it seriously. But at the same time, it means that you do get these people who are jumping on the bandwagon and doing this performative allyship, just to get their woke likes. And he's one of them, because if he truly cared for Black and brown people, he'd be doing more for Black and brown people and not sitting there in his mansion wiping his bum with his dollar bills.
Yeah. I think economics is going to come around a lot. It's going to be a theme that we continue to hit on. The point that he's built what is amounting to $1 trillion company nearly is going to be one of the it's world history. Literally, it's world history. People do need to remember capitalism always has to capitalize on something or somebody. And that's precisely what is done. I think Hassan Minaj's Patriot Act episode on Amazon and their practices, their predatory practices, is really good in terms of the way that Bezos and his strategy was always to monitor. The reason that they monitor the businesses that are doing so well on the Amazon platform is that they offer to buy them out, and if they continue to succeed, they are then if they won't sell to Amazon, Amazon aggressively goes after them by basically copying the product, scaling up production so that they can get a cheaper, so that they can put it out cheaper. Because they have control of the platform, of course, they take that audience, so they use the platform against that person. or against that specific company. I think the one that I looked at was I forgot exactly what the product was. It was something like Pampers-ish, so something adjacent to toddlers.
.com, wasn't it? Like,
Yes, it was the diapers one.
Yeah, exactly. So
as well.
Yeah, so literally, apparently, if you even type diapers.com or whatever the URL is, it redirects you to Amazon, which obviously shows you that he bought the company.
Yeah. And that's the point. Like they aggressively take over these companies, and basically use their scale against smaller companies. We need to remember that this is not anything. This is not anything new either. This is how Rockefeller used to take his competitors out of business. If you understand, especially if you understand the process of production, if you understand that, so what Rockefeller used to do, instead of going after a rival mine, he would go after the supplier of their shovels and pickaxes, and he would take their feet from under them. And that's how insidious it can be, because of course, on the front line, it can seem like he's gone about it correctly, but obviously in the back, he's taken them out of business by eliminating essential resources for such a business. That kind of predatory practice is not new. Like I said, it's been practiced before, and is one of the ways that essentially racists can use economics. And obviously, the downhill effect is that what happens to the people who are depending on that money, because of course they tend to be from working class backgrounds, so on and so forth. I've gone a bit more abstract, so let's keep it specifically on Bezos and Amazon's practices. Sorry, Husni, did you have something you wanted to say? Because I want to talk about tax a little bit.
No, we can go to tax actually. Yeah.
All right. The thing I was going to say about tax is that, like we said, $1 trillion company should be paying significant tax. The reason it needs to be paying significant tax is because that $1 trillion that $1 trillion company has been built off the efforts of the people within it, and they are the ones who rely on the roads, who rely on the schools, who rely on the doctors that the taxes pay for. So just to say that it is privately owned and to find mechanisms of circumventing that is criminal. I think people really need to remember that we aren't taught taxes in school. That's another big point that that I think the Black Lives Matter movement needs to be making a point of teaching once not even once these protests are done. I think that needs to be a condition for them to stop, to be perfectly frank. This kind of stuff needs to be included in curriculums.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like tax, compound interest, mortgages, all of that, actual life skills that you need should be taught. Like, we need trigonometry for. Like, those things are more important for sure.
Yeah,
definitely. I think that's the only way we can actually get forward, really, as a community, is learning these things from a young age. And as I said in other episodes, it's all about community coming together, setting up trust funds or something, and literally going out buying units of like apartments where we have like a trust fund as a community. As I said, it's little as £20 a month, dollars a month, whatever. Like all those things actually help to put down payments on like maybe an abandoned building, turn it into some properties and stuff. And then that's, I think, how the generational wealth with these people get created. But that Jeff Bezos and these they're on a different stratosphere when it comes to everything. I feel like billionaires are like they think they're demigods basically, and if you think about it, they kind of are. They are protected from everything.
Yeah, they live in a different world to us.
They can do what they like. They basically don't pay taxes, and one ways they can get around that is by saying, "Oh, we give to charity," but then that money then goes into something called DAF, which that means that money does not leave the account and can sit there for years and years. So they've said, "Oh, I'm pledging 300 million here," just so that their taxes get cut and all this stuff. But that isn't actually going to the people. But having said that, though, I don't think. I never expect a millionaire to save anyone. Let's be honest. They all have their own agendas. They're narcissists, usually egotistical. I'm not saying just because you're rich, these things come to you. But when you get a lot of money and you see the way money controls human beings, like some sort of weirdness clicks in your head to the point where you can humanize people.
It's when you get to a point where you have so much money that you literally have no use for it. But then
Let me
all of it's like
keep going, Charlie. Keep going. Just give me 1 sec.
all of a sudden you just it's like something's in their head and they become really greedy, and not to say that they weren't greedy to begin with, obviously, but I think a lot of people will start a business, and this is not talking about Jeff Bezos, so I don't know what he's thinking, but a lot of people will start a business and be like, oh yeah, you know what, I'm for the people. I want to make sure that I have a business that's going to help my community. And then obviously when they get to a certain point and they're making so much money from the business, it's like something just takes over them and they become money hungry and they're doing all this crazy things to like evade tax and doing XYZ, and then in the end they actually end up hurting their community more than they do to actually help them because they become just so greedy with it.
I think money is definitely all evil.
Absolutely.
Because like even the justice system is so weird. Like you see like people who've committed murders and all this madness like get less time than a guy who's maybe robbed an ATM or something, right? Like you might have, I don't know, got the ATM, did something to it, or like, you know, like wire hacking, you know, hacking accounts and banks and stuff. Like these guys will come after you if you mess with their money, but someone can like kill someone, for example, a police officer, and they have so much immunity and protection to kind of go about their business. But even like if they're not police officers, sometimes some people will shoot someone, get 10 years, and then 5 years they come out parole, boom, done. But then you like, oh, what did you do? Oh, I robbed a bank and I took like $1 million or let's say and then you're in prison for 70 years.
Yeah, and I think as well, like the prison system is like, well, this is a whole topic in itself.
Oh yeah, that's.
But it's rigged, and it only helps the rich really, because if you have money, you're able to afford bail, you're able to afford, you know, like good lawyers, you're able to basically get out, you can pay off the judges as well, all of these dodgy things, and then, you know, you come out and man's only got community service, even though he did XYZ, and you're just like, what the fuck? But man in the street over here, a black man is just caught with marijuana or a fake bill like George Floyd, and he ends up dead, or he ends up in prison with like life sentence, and it's just stupid.
Yeah, so it's a bit crazy in that sense. You know, there's a lot of things going to it, but all of these things affect poorer people in America and around the world as well. This is not just happening in America, to be precise. It happens everywhere. The rich are just on a different level playing field, and yeah, it's unless it's equal and everything gets toppled down. And I'm not saying people who work hard don't deserve to be rich and make money.
Absolutely not.
What we're like, the problem is the fact that your society is really, really unequal.
Yeah.
Like you are using people's sweat, tears, and everything, and sort of like allowing them to be your sort of slaves technically, and they're at your mercy, which is very, very wrong. And this goes for a lot of companies, not just Amazon. You got Boohoo, Sports Direct is bad for that as well. L'Oreal. There's so many people that abuse their staff on a daily.
Absolutely, and I think like when with money comes responsibility. Yes, you may have got yourself all this money and been like, but I didn't want to be the one who saves the world. And that's not what people are asking you to do, but it just comes with a bit of a responsibility. Just like if you become famous as well, it comes with responsibility. You have a platform and you need to use it in the right way. And that's all that people are asking you to do. Don't sit there and like, there's no shame in making money. There's no shame in getting your trillions, get your trillions in it. But like, don't do it at the expenses of other people. Be responsible and be accountable for what you're doing. And yeah, just
don't be a shitty human being. That's it.
That's it. Like with money, like I said, comes responsibility. With fame, it comes with responsibility. So that is just it's one of them unwritten rules that comes with when you sign the dotted lines. Like it just comes with it. So you need to just don't be a dickhead.
Yeah.
And I feel like Jeff Bezos is just jumping on the bandwagon, and he's not the only one. There's other people as well. You have
Well,
Um,
hold up. Before we roast more people, I want to talk about the. I mean, we're talking about Jeff Bezos specifically here, but we're still talking about, in general, the notion of how rich people are. And I actually realized it's actually astronomical how little people really understand how rich these rich people are. I was talking to somebody, and the analogies that he was using is, imagine one person has $1 and the other person has 1,000. And I said, like, okay, before we even start this, you if we're talking about analogies, we may as well make it realistic. For every $1 that these people earn, sorry, these people earn literally thousands of dollars per hour. It is really difficult to actually perceive somebody earning that much money, never mind having to spend that much money. I've got Nick Hanau's book here. I recommend everybody actually goes through here, Gardens of Democracy. It touches on one of the points that you've basically raised in terms of the tie between business and politics, and like how that should be regulated, basically, because if corporations are allowed to buy their own representation in politics and all that kind of good stuff, they then run the country for their own good, and that's the kind of thing that starts happening. The corporations start exploiting people. It's cheaper to exploit one person than it is to pay them fairly. For instance, give them paid holidays, let them have toilet breaks. Like, it's really that basic at the end of the day. Um, so that's one of the things that this basically touches on, because a government does have a position in this. This is what people imagine the government does. They regulate corporations. They of course, the corporations and the CEOs, their executives want to get as much money as they can for the company and for who they represent. It's government's job to say, okay, you've made that much money, you need to pay this much in taxes. You need to pay the people that work for you fairly, that kind of thing. And the government doesn't do that if they're paid to look the other way. The other point that I was going to talk about is like the violence of economic castration, even though it's so like silent. And it basically appears so benign, but it really isn't. Like, we've talked about some of the downhill effects that come from people not actually having that money when it comes to Corona. People have to stretch money and they have to decide between basically staying healthy. And at the end of the day, everybody needs a roof over their heads. We can talk about housing discrimination and all sorts, and redlining. That's for another episode. But that's just another place that money needs to go, basically. So there's just this idea that economic castration then introduces black people into a rigged justice system where you have to deal with the frontline executioners of this white supremacist system, and you can ultimately end, like, your life can end from police interaction. We can go into statistics of like how police interactions end when it comes to black people. More, yeah, it's disproportionate with how they end in violence, either black people dead or beaten.
mhm.
That's for another time. But basically, like, these all tie in together. Yeah,
Absolutely.
all these topics. So yeah, we can get back to Jeff Bezos and Amazon. Or sorry, were you done with him? I think
You can
we
go on
we
the track.
hmm?
We're done with him. You
All
can
right,
go
we're
on the
done. Yeah, yeah, keep going, keep going. I think, okay, let's address one of the other big ones, the NFL. They've annoyed the hell out of everybody. First of all, NFL, before you say anything, make sure you give Colin Kaepernick his job back. The losses from that he suffered since not being in his job, plus damages, because obviously this will have had a large psychological effect. Let's not forget that it was, I think, is it 2032? So I don't even know how many teams there are. Every owner conspired to make sure Colin Kaepernick did not have a place to go to after he knelt in in opposition to police brutality, to bring light to that situation. And let's not forget the NFL went right along with it. The whole league went along with its owners and pretended as if Colin Kaepernick did not exist as soon as they made sure that he didn't have a position. One of the things that did annoy me is ultimately they made money out of all the shirts that people bought, because they've got the NFL logo on them. So that was not the correct way to protest for black people. Let me not say correct, but that's not the most effective way to protest as a black person. Although he's in a way being immortalized, they still got money, and that's the thing that they are most like concerned with at the end of the day. And yeah, like we're saying, it's hella disingenuous, and it shows that the corporation itself is just hopping on this bandwagon, saying something to get some, or to, in the hopes of some kind of windfall down the road. And I'm really happy in on every platform I saw that statement. The comments were roasting them for Colin Kaepernick and and the way that they handled that situation. Like, they deserve it.
Absolutely. And then obviously you have the few white All Lives Matter movement people who are sitting there saying, "Oh, leave politics out of sports," when really Black Lives Matter is not political. It's about human rights, and it's not political. So we need to stop with that nonsense as well.
The same people who say this nonsense, like, first of all, if you watch any of these leagues, especially in American sports, there are black people in majority in the actual performance of that sport. And yet, we can talk about the managers and how they're underrepresented there another time, but black people, as long as they're performing, they are okay with black people occupying that position. As soon as they need to remember that those black people are black when they come off that field. And like people like Russell Westbrook, for instance, are speaking up about the kind of stuff that they grew up around, and speaking up against it. Like people like Kevin Durant have already talked about it, but they also realize that they're in a league that has punished people for being vocal about this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, the majority of, so I just quickly Googled it, the majority of the players are black. It says 70% of the NFL is black.
yeah, no
So
surprise.
yeah, so I don't understand why they were never backing Colin Kaepernick to begin with.
Yeah.
And now they're sitting here saying whatever nonsense that they're saying on their Instagram and on their social media platforms. Saying that Black Lives Matter and that they stand with the black community, and it's bullshit because we know that you don't, because
Yeah.
Colin Kaepernick is a prime example of that,
Yeah.
that you don't, you back him and you ostracized him and made him lose the job for doing something as peaceful as just kneeling. Like, there is no more of a peaceful way to kind of protest than what he did, and yet people still had an issue with it. It's just, yeah, it's just stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, the NFL hella disingenuous. Like, nobody believes you. That the handling of that situation was terrible, and we need to remember, Colin overtly came out afterwards saying that was to raise awareness for one of the things being police brutality, and a few years down the line, look what happens. And let's be frank, like, there have been police brutality cases in that space as well. The NFL has not put out statements about those. They're only hopping on this bandwagon because of the recognition that it would get because of how large the movement is. One of the posts on We Will Win Baba at the moment is about how one of the story posts is about how this is the largest movement, the largest civil rights movement in global history ever.
Yeah.
Like, people need to understand the significance of that, and that is partially because of the tools that we now have. Let's be frank. One of the things I've seen is it's not that racism is getting any better or worse, is that it's being filmed now, so people are actually seeing what it is that we've been talking about on a wider scale. We may not all personally have stories as harrowing as this, but there are lots of people that do, and they don't always have a camera on them. It's really that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think having social media platforms has allowed for the information to literally just go viral within minutes of posting it. So having social media has really played a massive part. And these companies know that as well. And that's why they're sitting there and saying something, because they see how much of a big movement this is becoming, and that this is. If they don't say anything, they know that they're going to lose a lot of people, and a lot of people who are just sitting there being performative about it as well. So they're not just going to lose black followers, but they'll also lose the white followers who are literally who are allies as part of the movement, and also they're going to lose the performative allies as well, because they're going to be sitting there thinking like, oh well, this company hasn't said anything. To be honest, I don't want you to say anything, because we know it's not true, because all these things that you're doing is your actions speak louder than words, and your actions are not showing not backing what you're saying.
Yeah,
No.
it's all PR stunt. Like from the get go, Colin got treated bad by everyone. They were getting all crazy. And let's be honest, America's situation is very, very crazy anyway. There's parts of the flag where they say you killed runaway slaves and all this kind of stuff from what I've heard. Also, if like the funny thing is with the people that say that all lives matter, they're the first ones to, and then if you ask them as well, how should people actually protest, if you don't want just a silent knee, you want, then now people are going, and then a lot of people are saying, oh yeah, it's violent, da, da, da. But there's a lot of white guys, as that guy said, in skateboards coming to these neighborhoods, literally looting and doing all sorts of craziness, and yeah, like there are some people as well from the black community who do this, but this is just part of what happens when you protest.
People are frustrated.
The frustration, but there's also like vultures as well. Like it's like a mad savannah out there. If an animal gets taken down, everyone's trying to eat. You know what I mean? It's a kind of human, like it's a very animal primal thing, really. So everyone's trying to get part of the cake, but at the same time, there are a lot of people who are just doing it because they want the social change. This is a social situation, and the NFL as well. Like, to be fair, they can literally take that and stick it up their candy asses, man. Honestly, it's absolutely diabolical to come out now. And if Colin hadn't had like the Nike thing as well, like they've taken away a guy's breadline. He's a lot for the community as well, so he's not the only person being affected. And for them to also take other white guys who've done various crimes, beating up their wives. There's a lot of guys in the NFL who are, not 100% really, who've done so much shady crap, but at the same time, they've been taken back by so many teams. So a lot of teams usually distance themselves, and now they've come out. They're trying to do the Olivia Pope thing, covering it up, PR fund, and it's not very, very genuine. But if they do give back the job to him, that would be quite funny to see if he actually accepts returning back to the NFL. I do believe the biggest thing, the thing that would have made it much more stronger, is if all black people in the NFL, the 70%, actually all did it with him. Because how are they now going to sack?
They can't sack that many.
They can't sack.
They will have no one have a team. They won't have enough team.
All these players, like EA Sports, Electronic Arts, they have the NFL game, right? And they license, the league license it to EA Sports, so they get money from that. There's money from jerseys, and let's be honest, a white kid's favorite player is a black guy. Marshawn Lynch, amazing. You got Kaepernick, all these guys, and like everyone's black. You know what I mean? And I think if they all did it together, it would have made a big thing. But I think the biggest fear is, a lot of these young guys have come from hardships and poorer backgrounds, and obviously now they're getting
lose
money.
Job.
And a lot of these guys are not only supporting themselves, they're supporting about 50, 60 to 100 members of the family. Black tax. So obviously, some people in the family are telling him, boy, you better keep your shit together. Don't lose your bread over some nonsense. And that's how some of the old generation used to be. Like, you go outside, you're a black kid, you get spat out, beaten up. They tell you, no, keep your head down. But then sometimes you do need to kind of tell them it's incorrect.
And I think, yeah, like you said, it's the fear, they had the fear of doing that. They might have agreed with what Colin was doing, but they just were too scared to kind of join in with it because they didn't want the same thing that happened to Colin to happen to them as well.
They
Yeah,
made an
exactly.
example.
They did.
Yeah.
They made an
And it's
example
done
of
it
Colin. That's the point.
Yeah. So, but do you guys think that people can change? So, obviously, like the NFL, as a company, have come out said this thing. Do you think that they can change? Have they
No,
learned from what they've done to
no.
Colin?
I think it's not just that it's the thing. This is what it comes down to. A lot of people think that you can just remove the head of such a corporation and then fix the problem, but it's clearly not that. This is something that's systemic, and that's why I
Mhm.
said it's significant that the 32 owners are the ones, or however many can. Actually, I'll get my Google machine. Um, all the owners of every team on the NFL conspired. They all decided that Colin Kaepernick was somebody that they weren't going to take. On top of that, these people do not just do this of their own volition. They have executive boards. So it's not just like one person who makes this decision. There are so many people involved. And if anybody's ever seen the scale even of like a college game, you'd understand how much larger than the NFL is, how much money they make from black bodies, and how and that just goes to speak to how much of a violation it is that they've economically castrated a person because he stood up against them. But yeah, that sorry. Staying on point, it's just the point that this is systemic. This is not just down to one person, and so we'd have to believe that what all of them are going to change now. And what is that based on? One of the things James Baldwin went into, I forgot in which talk it is, but he talks about how America is actually the point that he was making was basically that you're telling black people to believe you that you'll change based on what evidence. We've never seen this evidence. And like you said, racism isn't new. This is not something that's just popped up. For these corporations, and the reason we are so offended and we're talking about it is because of the harm that this allyship does, because all they want you to do is stay silent. And as soon as it goes back
Yeah.
underground, they've made their statement, they've got their windfall because people are now looking at them, they're happy, but the problem is still there. The problem has been there since before Colin Kaepernick. He brought attention to it. They castrated him. They kept moving along. It was business as usual. Now something happens and they want to hop along the bandwagon. It's not acceptable. That's
Yeah.
specific to NFL, but that's one of the things that I'm sure most of these corporations are guilty of.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're just doing it for the sake of doing it, really.
Get their
Yeah.
work likes.
Um,
Go back business as usual, basically,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Let's be
Business
honest,
as
all
usual.
big corporations, as soon as any, how can I say, any issue happens, who do they bring in? A PR company.
Yeah.
A PR company that can spin the story. You've seen it in politics, everything. They'll try spin it and they'll tell him, listen, just admit that you're wrong and people get over it. And that's what they do. As, there'll be a storm and then after that, it's okay. But I think a lot of people in the comments, the comments actually made my day. They were like,
Mm.
I wonder what Colin Kaepernick's doing today.
Yeah, exactly.
It was
Um,
amazing. And these weren't only black people, these were white people too. They were like,
yeah,
yo, where's Colin?
So
yeah.
just to add to this as well. So what can big brands and big corporations like this do in times like this? Is it better that they just stay silent, or should they put out statements? What should they do?
Everything's about action at this point. The reason we are roasting the NFL, I mean, we've left Nike out because obviously they've got stuff that's done by child labor. They've
Absolutely,
got
yeah.
products that are made by child labor, and yet they claim that they support these kinds of causes. But in respect to these ones, like you can't practice one thing visually and visibly on a repeated basis and then make a statement that goes against that. It doesn't match. So that's what I mean. Like action they have to um yeah, their actions have to match what they're saying. So specific
Absolutely.
to the NFL, there have to be many conversations had about who the owners are. My problem with the NFL is it gets a lot more ideological, to be honest. I just think it's a problem that there are so many black kids, especially in the US, that venerate these people, but they can't see themselves like basically off a football field. If that makes sense. Um, but what the NFL could do is there needs to be a serious conversation about black owners. I think the black billionaires like Diddy and them, they need to be having serious conversations about what they can do to actually own pieces of the NFL. I think there's going to be a lot of decolonization in terms of the whole structure. So like I said, it's not just the owners and the executive boards, but with the scale of these, it's going to be like the trainers, the people who actually recruit, and like the whole establishment needs an overhaul. There needs to be more representation, as well as talking about the um for me, I think there just needs to be a bigger talk on that, and the players themselves can also not be they for their political they can't be roasted for their political stance, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
they can't do another Kaepernick. That has to be outlawed. If a team tries to do that, then there needs to be a very heavy penalty on like anybody that's involved, basically.
Yeah.
I agree, and I think you can apply that to a lot of the corporations, big businesses, just backing what you're saying with action,
Mm,
looking at your executives, looking at your board members, looking at people who are leaders in your company, and making sure that they are of color,
mm,
and making sure that your population of your company is reflective of the population of your country as well.
mm,
Uh, and then also making sure that the pay gap as well is closed as well,
mm,
making sure you're paying everyone fairly, treating everyone fairly, and we just want equality, and that's what it is. And
Yeah.
don't just come out with these stupid statements without backing with action. I'd rather you do it silently and not even say anything, but
mm.
you're actually doing the work behind the scenes and actually making sure you're educating yourself, um, and actually doing the work behind the scenes and making sure that everyone is treated fairly
Yeah.
in that way.
There's something that I left out, and tax. Like literally, these corporations have to pay their tax. We
Yeah,
like if you understand, we can go into the Southern strategy another time, but like I've studied the strategy, and the dog whistling to the racist base, the dog whistling to the racist base is always one thing, because they understand that taking away tax is going to disproportionately affect black people because of the economics behind it. Like I said, these taxes are the ones that go towards paying schools, paving the roads, paying the nurses, even educating the nurses, keeping these scientific things, these scientific institutes open. People forget that COVID is something that needs to be studied, and the very institutes that we've been defunding for 10 years we're now relying on to come up with an answer like that. Like, it doesn't make sense. Anyway, we need to wrap up. Once again, we have much more to say, but there is not enough time to say it. So, to our audience, let us know what you think about the topics that we have been discussing. Give us your input. What do you think about what we've been talking about in specifically? What is this thing? Performative activism and allyship, and how harmful that can really be. We only really talked about Jeff Bezos and the NFL, and basically like few corporations. We've not even talked about Boris Johnson. Um, yeah, so
yeah, and yeah, a lot of celebrities as well we haven't touched on as well,
there's a lot of celebs we've not touched on.
very problematic. But anyways, you guys get the idea.
Yeah. Okay. So, what's the phrase? Something, something. Subscribe. Like,
Oh.
comment, and subscribe. That one.
Oh my God.
Hey.
Comment, subscribe. Be sure to follow us on our socials. We have an Instagram account. It's called We Will Win Baba. So make sure you follow us on there. Keep up to date with everything that we're doing. And
Yes.
we shall see you
Indeed.
next time.
Take care.
Peace. Take care. Bye. Okay.
We will win.
Cut.
We will win.